What's going on, everyone? Today I wanted to take a look at Dragon's Dogma 2 on my RX 6800 XT and Ryzen 5900X. I'd like to apologize to some of my viewers and subscribers who want to see Horizon Forbidden West. I've focused mostly on Dragon's Dogma 2 because Horizon Forbidden West is an excellently optimized game, and Dragon's Dogma 2 is kind of the opposite of that, which makes this game a little more interesting to take a look at, but also I feel it's more informative for the viewer who is maybe thinking of buying the game. Now we're going to begin here, as you can see, with 1440p, and we've gone ahead and maxed out every graphical setting, including ray tracing and shadow quality, the two settings that are the most demanding in the game, with ray tracing being number one. Now in this part of the video, I wanted to focus on the CPU core and thread utilization, so that's why I'm showing all the cores and threads, and at a glance, it actually looks all right. You can almost see that it's sort of evenly distributing the load, the CPU load, across all cores and threads, although we do have some cores and threads that are noticeably higher than the rest. That is nothing unusual. It's something you see in all other games. What is unusual, though, is GPU use. We're dropping into the 70s here and 80s, so that is very unusual, especially with ray tracing on the 6800 XT. But now if you look at our frame rate and frame times, it's not too bad. We seem to be getting around 70, averaging around 75, with 50 FPS 1% lows. Now before we go any further, I wanted to also test the cost of ray tracing, although I don't think we're going to get a very good representation because we are hitting some CPU limits, but we're going to test it anyway. We're going to go ahead and make our way to the village where there's a mission that we have to complete. And we have ray tracing enabled on the left and ray tracing off on the right. And we're able to gain plus 20% more average FPS with ray tracing disabled and plus 9 more FPS on the 1% lows, which is pretty nice and actually does match the 4090 and 7900 XTX. So that is kind of strange. This game is very, very interesting to benchmark, I tell ya. But because I do like the way Ray Trace Global Illumination looks in this game, and the 6800 XT is capable of maintaining a 60 to 70 FPS experience, we're going to leave it on. But we're also going to take a look at 4K, and things get very, very interesting in a little bit, where it kind of blew my mind, actually. We're going to make our way to the cave to complete our mission, and we've gone ahead and put ray tracing back on, and we're targeting 1440p native. Here's the settings so you guys can see that we're on the same page. We also have shadow quality to max because clearly 6800 XT is capable of delivering a somewhat 60 to 70 FPS experience. Now some of these areas can be a bit lighter. As you can see here, we're in the 80s and 90s of FPS, and there are some areas like that. There's also another area I found that was a bit disastrous, kind of like the city, that we're going to take a look at in a little bit. But my recording of 1440p native in this mission was about 15 minutes long. Now obviously this isn't necessarily a gameplay video, it's mostly focused on the performance, so we're going to kind of skip around and we'll sort of examine the 1% lows and averages at the end of this recording, and that'll kind of give us an outlook of how the 6800 XT did in actual gameplay, fighting things, exploring the world, which is kind of what you're gonna mostly be doing, right? This is the monster calling mission. That's 3 parts. You actually get it in the very beginning, where you have to save soldiers that are out to fight monsters. And this was the last part of that mission, where you essentially go inside this cave and fight a bunch of Sorens, I think these guys are called. You have to cut their tail off and then you can damage them. They can be very difficult, actually, if you don't, like you can see here, they can actually kill you really fast if you don't play your cards right. But we do end up saving the soldiers in the cave, and we turn the quest in. And what I thought of doing from this point on was to essentially go back to the city to return the mission, but take a different route. There's a road that I'd yet to explore that goes along the coast. My idea was to take a different road and see what's going on. Maybe we can run into some bosses, because big bosses in this game can get a little bit hectic. We did have a villager come up to us and ask us for help because their village had got raided by the lizard people, and since we're the Arisen, sure, why not? Let's throw in a little bit more battles in the mix, and then we can compare what our averages and 1% lows are in the end at 1440p native, and then we can turn on FSR Quality just to see the type of gains we can get, if there are even any to be had, because I'm looking at the numbers here, and I don't think there's going to be much to be had, honestly. I think we're still going to have similar 1% lows, just because we seem to be CPU bound, and you're going to see actually this coastline is, the performance is actually very, very interesting. It's going to get very, very interesting. Let's go ahead and turn on FSR to quality and keep every other setting the same. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take the road hugging the coast to go back to the city. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put on the screen the averages and 1% lows from our 1440p native run that we just did. And that way we can sort of compare with what's going on with FSR quality. Theoretically, we should get more FPS, but not really. Because as you can see, the GPU use is now dropped into the 70s consistently. And for some reason, this area here, it appears to be quite a bit more CPU demanding. But don't worry, it's going to get a lot worse. And I'm trying to figure out why. I don't understand. I know they said that NPCs in the city, Capcom said this in a statement, NPCs in the city apparently are taxing on the CPU because of their AI and behaviors, and I mean, I'm not saying they're lying, obviously. I don't know. I hate to make assumptions and believe in conspiracy theories. I'm more of like a numbers person. Like if I think something is the reason why something is happening, I like to try to find out and sort of present my findings. But I just find it weird because if you play the first Dragon's Dogma, right? Like these same type of enemies exist in that game as well. So it makes you wonder, like, now I never played Dragon's Dogma back in the day on PC, so I don't know how that game ran at the time. But right now, I mean, you can run it no problem. I've been playing it on my Steam Deck actually prior to Dragon's Dogma 2 releasing. So that's why I don't know exactly what's happening. There has to be more than that because it's not that many NPCs in here. I mean, sure, there's some, you know, enemies that we're fighting, but it's not really that many of them, you know. But by the way, there is some treasures and stuff to find in this area. For example, at the top of this rock here, there's a Seeker's Token. So you definitely want to grab that. Now I want you to take a look at our averages currently in 1% lows, right? They're not that much different from 1440p native. As a matter of fact, 1% lows are pretty much identical, which shows you that we are being CPU limited here. Still 54-55. Now right before going through the cave and following the road to the city, I wanted to take a look at 4K with FSR set to quality. So here's the settings for that. We're targeting 4K. We're going to leave FSR to quality because we're targeting 4K. And interestingly enough, I did not capture footage of this, but I actually tested 4K in this area that we're about to go in. And I was hitting CPU limitations. That's insane, guys. That is not normal for a 6800XT to hit CPU limitations. But at least if you look at the GPU use, right, the way it's being utilized is not very consistent. But anyway, entering this cave, there's a giant ogre. And these enemies are normally a lot of fun to fight because they leap everywhere. But look at our frame times. Look at what's going on. That's like what happens in the city. And this area here is an absolute mess. Playing, it was so difficult, and I really wanted to kill this guy, but it was just, it was so unpleasant to play, and I couldn't figure out why the performance is like this. At first I thought that maybe it's something VRAM related, because it does kind of behave like that, but I mean, looking at the allocation, we're at 13, almost 14 gigs actually, and only 10 close to 11 gigabytes of actual use. So I don't think that's the issue here. But if you look at the GPU use, I just seen it drop to the 30s. Normally, from my experience, when you run out of VRAM, your GPU use stays pegged, basically. But it's just that the game is having to use system memory, so you run into frame time inconsistencies. But this is really, really bad. So this area may actually be worse than the city, and I might actually, in a future video, maybe, I might take a look at this on the 4090 as well, because I'm really, really curious to see, because I don't understand why. And at first I thought that maybe it's just the ogre fight, but I've fought ogres before, actually on the 6800 XT and at 4K, and I did not see anything like this. So I don't know what's happening. Maybe they're using the CPU to render the rocks. I have no idea. I honestly have no idea why the performance is like this here. But what I wanted to check out, I wanted to drop the 1440p and see if it was the same. So I did drop the 1440p, and here's the settings for that. As you can see, 1440p. I set FSR to off because we don't need it. Clearly, we've seen the 6800 XT be able to tackle that no problem. And lo and behold, the same behavior. The frame time is horrendous. 1% lows are terrible. Look at that, GPU use went to 23%. But as we got close to the other side of the cave, the performance ended up stabilizing again. And once we were fully outside, bought some goblins, and then I wanted to go back to 4K with FSR Quality to see if this behavior ended up repeating. So let's go through the settings again. As you can see here, we're back at 4K with FSR set to quality, ray tracing's enabled, shadow quality is on max, and we're gonna have to unfortunately travel in the dark. This game is actually does nighttime very well, actually, because even the enemies change. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the video, I was in for a surprise. But we just keep going forward to our destination, and we're back to that, you know, 54 FPS averages and around 40 something or whatever, 1% lows. So I don't think 4K is really doable, at least in an enjoyable way, with a 6800 XT. I think it's too much for it, as you can clearly see here. And yeah, I guess we could try turning ray tracing off. It's still not going to be enough for a 60 FPS experience, or close to it, because I have actually tried it. But I was genuinely curious here to see how it would run. And yeah, I would say for 60 FPS, 1440p, the 6800 XT does really well. Now, what type of CPU you have will determine what type of experience you're going to have. Probably more than the type of GPU you have in this game. So now, while I was playing at 4K, I wanted to test FSR Balanced as well and see if we could have got maybe a little bit more performance. And yeah, it's it's about the same. It's not really that big of a difference. You still get those drops to the 40s, and I guess that makes sense because it seems to be more engine and system related at this point. And look at this. I run into zombies. I had never seen zombies in this game, but holy cow, they can actually take a lot of hits, and they're kind of relentless. So here we're right outside the city gates. It's the bridge on the west side of the city. So we're right there, and we eventually do make our way to the city, where you get a guaranteed terrible performance no matter the type of hardware you have. There's no escaping it. I think if you play at 1440p, the 6800 XT is fine. It's a great GPU that would be capable of running this game no problem, as long as they fix, you know, the way they utilize the processor to render the game, or to run the game, to calculate everything in the game. They need to fix that. Or, I mean, as you've seen in my other videos, even the 7900 XTX and 4090 can run into CPU issues. Even with the 7800X3D, and I suggest you guys watch Gamers Nexus's video. He tested a ton of CPUs, and it was basically the 7800 XTD and 14900K that were at the top, but they were both experiencing the same issues. In the city, performance is terrible. Outside the city, it's much better, more consistent. But yeah, it does need work. But thanks for watching the video. Leave your comments and suggestions below. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all have a great one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.